Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. It's an absolutely beautiful day here in Tokyo today. It doesn't seem so much like winter, it's more like spring outside. It's sunny, blue skies, white clouds, not so cold. It would be a wonderful day to shoot this video outdoors, but I've been quite busy recently. I've received a lot of orders and I got backed up a little bit because about 10 days ago I had to go to New York City for a week. I had a business-related thing which I had to attend out there, and so it kind of kept me busy during that period. And I brought my young daughter with me because she loves New York City. She loves the pizza and the shops and stores and things that she can't find here in Japan. So we enjoyed a nice week in New York, even though it was quite cold there, and we had a bit of snow during our visit. But it's nice to come back here to Tokyo where the climate is much warmer. I don't often get to go to New York in the wintertime, and I think that's kind of a good thing. I'm back and getting caught up on my orders. I think by today I'm finally caught up with everything, and everything's packed up and on its way. And now that that's done, I thought I have about half an hour here which I can use to make and upload a video. And so here I am. And today's video is something I hope you find interesting. What I'm going to be doing is comparing a couple of pro-level SLR cameras from the mid-1970s, the Olympus OM-1 and the Pentax MX. And these are kind of an interesting kind of pro-level camera because these are kind of a different approach to what pro-level cameras were through the 60s and 70s and even on toward today. Normally when we see a professional level camera, it's usually a rather large and heavy camera with which is a very sturdily, bulkily constructed with features like interchangeable prisms, interchangeable backs, a variety of motor drives and power winders and things like that, not to mention battery packs and flash adapters and all this kind of stuff which fits on them. And these were kind of the workhorse camera for professional photographers starting from the early 60s. And in those days, it was kind of considered a camera like the Nikon or Nikon F was considered a lightweight camera compared to something like a Graflex. But these cameras are still heavy, and if you're a pro and you're carrying two bodies or sometimes even three bodies, it can be quite a burden to have to carry around. And Yoshihisa Maitani, or we say the opposite here in Japan, Maitani Yoshihisa, decided to create a new SLR camera for the Olympus company. He decided to go the opposite way. During the 1960s, he had engineered the Pin F half-frame SLR camera, which was quite popular. It wasn't a hugely popular camera, but it was quite popular. It made Olympus money, and it's hard to believe that the half-frame format was a professional photographer's camera, but a few notable professionals used them. And so Maitani thought that maybe the same approach could be taken to a full-frame 35mm camera. And he went to work with his design team, and using the Leica M series camera as, I guess, his target, he designed what was the first of his pro-level SLR cameras, and that was the Olympus M1, which was released in 1971. And of course, due to the legal troubles with Leica, they had to change the name to the OM-1, and the OM-1 went on the market in 1972. And it enjoyed a really long production run and turned out to be a remarkably successful camera, a much more successful camera than the Pin half-frame camera, and which went on in production in various guises all the way up into the 2000s. So it was a really wonderful design, and it showed that there was a market for a pro-level lightweight SLR camera. Now, because of the success of the Olympus OM-1, Pentax decided to make their own pro-level camera, and this was Pentax's pro-level camera until they eventually released the LX camera at a later time. The MX was introduced a few years after the OM-1. I think it was 75 or 76 that the MX was released, and it was made up until the mid-1980s. And it was quite a popular camera, and I still see a lot of these around here in Japan today. There are a lot of people who still carry them around, and I still find them in camera shops. So I'm not sure how popular they were around the rest of the world, but in Japan they were definitely popular cameras. So the Olympus was a completely new design, It was designed pretty much from the ground up, the M1 and OM series. The Pentax camera, it came from a kind of an evolution of their K series cameras, made a little bit more compact, a little bit smaller. And the MX was more or less the mechanical version of the ME, which was probably their most popular 35mm cameras of that era. And I remember I was hunting around looking for I was trying to find something that my mother-in-law wanted at her house, and digging through a box I found her old Pentax ME, which was the family camera of my wife and her family, and zillions of these things were sold. So let's go ahead and take a look at the comparisons between the two cameras. I'm going to discuss their strengths and weaknesses here, and what makes one better than the other. And I'll go ahead and start with the Olympus OM-1, because it's a camera which I'm more familiar with. I've shot with one of these cameras quite a lot, and I'm kind of familiar with the operating system. When the camera was designed, it was to be a compact, easy-to-handle, lightweight camera which could be used rather quickly. And the design of this camera dates back to the 1960s, and featured a few interesting features which were new to Olympus and other makers. And basically what this was, a 35mm SLR camera with a fully mechanical shutter, interchangeable focusing screens, interchangeable film backs, and later on it was updated to accept a motor drive or power winder. And the arrangement of the controls was designed to be more, I guess, one-handed than the conventional cameras. And the main difference between this camera and the MX is the fact that you have the aperture rings and the shutter speed ring located on the lens and the lens mount. So this allows you to make both settings without taking your hand off the controls. You can bracket very simply without having to move your hand from the shutter speed dial to the winding lever. And this was a feature which professionals liked a lot, and it turned out to be a really wonderful system. And it reminds me of a little bit of the old Nikon or Nikon rangefinder cameras. Basically, those offer a kind of a one-handed operation with the aperture and the focusing, which you can do with the right hand, and then you can use your left hand to change the shutter speed, or even your thumb, if you are, once you figure out how to use it. The Pentax MX, on the other hand, is very conventional. It has the shutter speed dial located in the usual location, which was, I guess, introduced by Leica way back in the 1920s. And basically a very conventional design. And if you've shot pretty much any 35mm camera, SLR camera of the 60s, and even some rangefinder cameras, the operating system is very similar. Both of the cameras feature the ability to accept data backs, and of course when these cameras were released there weren't a lot of options available, especially for the Olympus camera. There wasn't really a data back available for this camera when it was released, but Olympus looked forward to the future and understood that they would be able to make them, and so when they designed the camera, it came with the capability of removing the film back and adding the additional data back. And by the time that the Pentax cameras had been released, data backs were already on the market. Now, Nikon had the first data back on their f2 camera. It was quite a large and impressive thing with the kind of analog dials which you would use to program the date and year on the back, and of course those became digital before long. One thing which is different on the MX compared to the OM-1 is that it uses LEDs in the viewfinder to show the shutter speed setting, or I guess the light meter doesn't show the shutter speed, but to indicate the over or under exposure. And as you turn the aperture or turn the shutter speed ring, you'll see the LEDs moving up or down. When you reach the green one in the center, that means you have the proper exposure. Whereas the Olympus uses the more conventional setting for the more conventional match needle system. Now, one feature that the Pentax MX has, which is superior to the Olympus, is the fact that you can see the aperture numbers through this little window in the front. And Olympus hadn't figured that out. It didn't have a method to do that when this camera was introduced. So basically, you have to look at the front of the lens. If you're using the cameras, in more of an automatic mode, you don't really need to. It's not so important to know what aperture you're using. You can use cameras in kind of a fully manual camera like these. You can use them on either a shutter or manual priority mode, depending on what you were trying to do. For example, if you're in a lower light situation, you will want to shoot a larger aperture, so you will set the camera to, say, the minimum shutter speed you want to use, so say like 1/60th of a second, and you would simply turn the aperture ring until you get the correct exposure showing on the light meter in the dial, and that will make sure that you don't get any blur on the image. And in other cases, you can use the aperture setting which you like for, say, the depth of field you were looking for, and then simply change the shutter speed until you get the correct reading on the light meter inside the viewfinder. Now, there are some weaknesses to these cameras, which I should point out, and things which you should look for if you are going out to buy one. The big weakness in the Olympus OM series is the prism, and the prism in these cameras is very prone to deterioration. When the camera is assembled, there is a strap which is put down on top of the prism to hold it into place, and underneath the strap they put some foam rubber, which protects the prism and from shocks and stuff like that. But the issue is that this foam rubber, the chemicals break down in it and etch into the coating on the prism and cause these hideous black splotches in the prism. So if you're shopping for one of these cameras, always take a look through the viewfinder to make sure that there's no deterioration. You usually see it around the bottom if you're looking through it. It's not difficult to change the prism in one of these cameras. You can do it with basic hand tools, and I have a video on my channel somewhere showing how to replace the prism in one of these cameras. Another issue which these cameras have is the battery chamber can become corroded, and the spring, which maintains pressure against the battery, can sometimes break, or the screw pull out, and then you don't get good contact against the battery. You can fix that by putting a little piece of tin foil between the battery and the clip on the inside. One benefit about the camera, though this camera is designed to use the MR9 1.3 volt battery, you can use just an ordinary LR44 battery. You just drop it inside and put the cap on, and normally that works almost every time. The only problem is that if you are running a 1.5 volt battery, an LR44 battery in this, the meter will not be accurate. It will be around 2 stops or so off. It's hard to say how much. It depends on the particular camera. You can modify these cameras by removing the bottom cover and detaching the wire and installing a diode between the power wire and the battery compartment, and that will allow you to get the correct voltage. The easiest option is just to use a wine cell battery, and these give you the correct 1.3 volt voltage, or you can use adapter with a diode built in, and then you can use an ordinary LR44 or SR44 battery. It will fit perfectly and give you the correct voltage. Now, the benefit of the Pentax MX is it uses normal or more modern LR44 or SR44 batteries, so you don't have to worry about the issues which are give you the trouble that we have in the Olympus OM-1. The MX does have its own issues, and the issues with this camera are the sticking mirror and sticking shutter assembly. And as the years have gone by, this has only gotten worse in these cameras as they age. And I was hunting around for these cameras last week. I must have looked at 10 or 15 of them, and of those 10 or 15 cameras, only 4 had working shutters. And that's a pretty bad defect rate or failure rate, and mainly this is due to the cameras just sitting for a long time and not being used. The camera works well like other machines do if they get used from time to time. They need exercise. So if you've got an old film camera and you want it to keep working the way it should, take it out and use it from time to time. And even if you don't have film in it, go ahead and cycle it a few times, just so to keep everything moving and to help circulate the grease and lubricants and whatever on the inside, and your camera will last a lot longer. Repairing the stuck mirror and shutter is kind of difficult. It depends on the cause. Often the cause of the stuck shutter is gum in the mechanism, and the mechanism inside the MX is quite complex and difficult to clean and service. And though I've done it a few times, I'm always pulling out my hair when I'm trying to get one of these cameras fixed and operating. So when I'm looking for them now, if it says the shutter won't work or the mirror is keeps sticking upward on it, I won't touch it. I'll just avoid it altogether and avoid the headache I have trying to fix it. It usually involves removing the leatherette on the front and the self-timer cover and all this kind of stuff, and I just don't have the energy or motivation to mess with that. The positive thing about the OM series is that it never has that kind of issue. The operating system inside the camera is incredibly reliable. And as I said, 4 out of, say, 15 of these weren't working. When I was looking at OM cameras, I didn't find a single one where the shutter wasn't working. There were other issues, of course, that I found in these cameras, mainly with the prism or sometimes the light meter not working. But for a more solid, reliable camera, which is going to last a long time, the OM-1 is probably the better choice. Now, a lot of people don't choose the camera so much for the body as for the lens, because the lens is basically the heart and soul of the camera. It's what gives the image its sharpness, its resolution, its quality. And so, when you are choosing the system you want, normally, I often, when I buy a camera, I buy it based upon a particular lens which I like. So I have a Canon FD camera because I have a 35mm f2 concave lens, and I really love the performance of this lens, and because of that I had to get a body which would allow me to use it. Now, the lenses for these cameras are phenomenal. They are extremely high quality lenses, very modern, very well made, very compact and light compared to the full-size SLR lenses on Nikon or Canon, and relatively inexpensive, and sometimes incredibly inexpensive. So with the lenses, one thing you have to look for when you are hunting for the lenses is I always look for fungus on the inside of the lens. I look for marks on the front and marks on the coating on the back. The light seal issue, which is in the cameras, pretty much all of them, they have to have the light seals replaced. And the chemicals from the light seals, and there's usually a light seal bumper on the front of pretty much all SLR cameras, that can deteriorate, and a residue from that sometimes gets on the rear element of the lens and can cause difficulties or discoloration or damage to the coating. So always check the rear element. Some of these lenses are easy to disassemble and clean. The OM series lens is not difficult to take apart. For a camera like this, the 50mm lens, you remove the name ring on the front, remove the filter ring that comes off. Be careful not to lose the little check ball which operates the stops on the aperture. Then you can remove the front lens element with a proper tool. And if you don't have the proper tool and you're very careful, you can use a large pair of vice grips with the needle nose style, and that will kind of get it out. Sometimes they're very tight and hard to get loose, but when you get the front element apart, it's very easy to clean the inside of the lens. The Pentax lenses are easier to service, and when it comes to Nikon and Canon, those are even easier yet. Now, the best lenses for these cameras, my favorite lens for the Olympus OM series is just the basic 50mm f1.8 lens. The 50mm or 55mm f1.2, the early version with the really gold coloring on the lens. I really love the way that lens renders. When it comes to the Pentax lens, I like this lens here. I love the 50mm f1.4. I think this is my favorite lens for the K-mount cameras. I haven't really used a lot of the other lenses, so I don't have so much experience with them. With the Olympus, I also love the 21mm f3.5. I spent a week with one of those one time, and I really love the results I got out of it. And some of the lenses, like the 90mm f2 macro lens, that's a phenomenal lens, and something which is it can put a lot of the more modern lenses produced today to shame. But unfortunately, they have gotten quite expensive in recent years. It was kind of interesting. A few years ago, you could buy a 40mm f2 lens for one of these cameras here in Japan for about $200, and now you're lucky if you can find one for $1,000. And some of the more scarce lenses, the 18mm or 16mm lenses, are getting stupidly expensive. Mainly, the collectors are picking them up because, besides being wonderful performing lenses, not very many of them were made. Fortunately, for better or worse, Pentax hasn't suffered from this issue. Most of their lenses, there weren't any really hard to find or exotic lenses. They were basically good working lenses, and they are reasonably priced and excellent performers. Another thing which a difference between these cameras, if you're looking at to adding a motor drive or power winder, the early OM-1s don't have any way to attach it. They can be converted. The parts aren't hard to find, or you can simply find one which has MD on the sticker, which means it's been changed or updated or was built to accept a motor drive or power winder. And of course, the Pentax comes with the capability to take it without already. So anyway, that's it for my comparison between these two cameras. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll be listing most of these cameras for sale in my online stores shortly. So if you're looking for a nice Pentax OM-1 with the late production 50mm f1.4 lens, please check my Etsy store over the weekend or my online store. And the same for this MX. This one here is doesn't have the most beautiful shiny finish on it, but it's a good working camera and everything works properly on it, which is getting kind of scarce today for the MX bodies. So please check out my stores, and you should be able to find these in there shortly. And I'll be adding a few more items to my stores this weekend. Now that I'm getting all my boxes shipped out, I have more time to do that. So please stop by and take a look and see what I'm putting in. And if you have any questions or comments about these cameras, any experiences with them, feel free to share it in the comment section below. I'm sure a lot of people would like to know. And thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.